The time was a few minutes past 7 a.m. Something was gnawing at me. It was a distant memory trapped somewhere in the recess of my mind. I wanted to think and recall what it was, but the movie playing on the screen was more interesting. "It's not another horror movie, is it, Jake?" my younger brother asked. "Looks like it," I told him with a smirk. He groaned. On the TV screen, a dog was pawing wildly at the soil. His owner, a boy of just over 10 years, sat on the porch watching his dog dig frantically like it was desperate to get to something buried in the ground. "Rocky," he called. "What are you doing?" The dog, Rocky, kept digging. "Rocky," the boy called again. If Rocky heard, he didn't give any sign that he had. He just kept digging. Intrigued, the boy came off the porch and walked down to the spot where the dog was working the soil loose. He hunkered down just in front of him. "What are you looking for, boy?" he asked. The dog stopped in and looked up at him. It was then that he noticed something in the soil. It was something dull white, just a little brown in some places because of the dirt. "Is that?" The boy reached for it and then withdrew his hands. He turned to look at his dog. The dog barked at him. The boy started to dig too, moving the soil away from around whatever was in the ground. As it was more exposed, it gradually became clear what it was. A skull. The boy pulled it loose and held it up to look at it. Just beneath it, the sound of glass panes vibrating rose into the air. It graduated to a heavy rumbling. An eerie blue light came to life within the skull. The boy threw it away and scrambled backward. Behind him, the ground burst open and a skeletal hand thrust into the air. "Go check who it is," I told Jake. "Oh." He shook his head in a vigorous refusal. Somehow he had gotten it into his head that the ghosts from the other horror movies we've been binging on since morning were lurking in different corners of the house and waiting to get him alone. I sighed and rose to get to the door. To my amusement, he followed me down the hallway to the threshold. The house key was in the lock, so I twisted it right to unlock the door and pulled the knob. The door swung back to reveal my father looking angrier than I'd ever seen him. We'd not heard him drive in, and that seemed to displease him quite a bit. "Why the hell is the backyard still untouched?" he asked. I pulled back, scratching my head. "What?" He took a step forward. He had asked Jake and me to clear the weeds which had overgrown the yard. We just moved into this new place, and it seemed that the old owners had cared too little for it in the days that preceded its sale to my father. Now, unfortunately, it fell to Jake and me to do the work they should have done. "I'm sorry, Dad," I said. "We forgot." He sneered. "You forgot? I bet you were in front of that darn TV all day and night doing nothing." "We'll do it tomorrow," I assured him. "First thing." He shook his head. "No, you will do it now. Both of you. Now. Now." The note of finality in his voice spoke no argument. I had lived around this man for 20 years. That was long enough to understand his moods. Somebody had probably pissed him off at work. Now he was going to transfer his aggression to Jake and me. "What are you waiting for?" he asked. "Jump to it." Beside me, Jake shrank back. He was just 11, still young enough to be scared easily. I, on the other hand, had grown at that stage. All his displeasure ever provoked in me these days was anger and a yearning for true independence. Unfortunately, I'd never get that until I got a well-paying job. Until then, I'd have to do whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. "Come on, Jake," I said and went round my father. The lawnmower and other tools were in the garage. Dad was yet to set up his dream tool shed in the backyard. I grabbed the lawnmower. "Get that digger, Jake." "What's it for?" he asked. "Stumps," I told him, "for the stubborn shrubs." He picked it up and followed me out of the house. I turned on the mower and started to cut down the weeds in earnest. The shrubs which lie in the side of the house would come later. Jake sat and watched as I mowed the grass. When I was done, I took the digger from him and started to uproot the shrubs. It was as I dug up the second shrub that I hit something hard. I stopped and checked to see what rock had lodged itself beneath the plant, but it wasn't a rock. "What's that?" Jake asked. I didn't need to dig it up to know what it was. One of the empty eye sockets was above the ground, staring sightlessly at nothing. "What's that?" Jake asked again. "A skull," I told him. "Jesus Christ," he scrambled away. What's it doing here? Somebody died here? Ghosts. Jake, will you chill for goodness sake? I snapped. It's just a skull. There's no ghost. Where there are dead people, there'll always be ghosts, he countered. You saw it in the movie? I scoffed. It's just a movie, silly, not reality. That didn't convince him, so I went to the extreme. I'll just pull this thing out so you'll see it's nothing. No, Jake. There was a moment of silence in which our wills clashed. After a brief battle, mine prevailed. Jake sighed. It's dangerous. I hooked a finger in the empty socket and pulled. The skull didn't even budge. Suddenly, I felt a tremor beneath me and the glass panes of the house windows started to vibrate loudly. What's that? Jake asked. He rose to his feet and began to back away. They're coming. Oh no. Nobody is coming, Jake, I told him. But I didn't pull at the skull again. Rather, I rose to my feet to inspect the window. The glass panes were vibrating. Quickly, I ran into the house to inspect. Funnily enough, the room closest to the backyard was mine. I scoffed and went into the room to inspect. The window panes were vibrating here, and there was no one in the room. I went closer and touched them. The floor shook suddenly, and a distant boom rocked my psyche. I jumped away from the window, startled. Jake's voice floated to my ears from somewhere in the house. Ghosts. Dad, there's a ghost in the house. I backed out of the room quickly, but the tremors in the floor followed me out. Oh God, I wondered, what is happening? Jake, scream again. Stay away from the window. There's a ghost outside. Its skull is... Shut up, you silly twit, Dad snapped. I followed their voices into the living room and found Dad standing by the window with his hand on the panes. Jake was sitting on the sofa, his hands folded tightly around himself. It's just an earthquake, Dad announced. It's my first month in this town, and the godforsaken earthquake couldn't even wait. Even though I hated how he spat the words at my brother, they brought me relief. I sat next to Jake and pulled him into my arms. It's just an earthquake, like he said. I told him, just give it a minute, it'll pass. The tremors stopped then, and everything became still. Now it was my turn to tell Dad something he wouldn't like. There's a skull in your backyard, by the way, I said. I just thought you should know. This happened like 16 years ago. I was 12 then. I was in the summer camp of my Boy Scout troop, but with both boys and girls. As are all in Spain, scouting here is actually a quite liberal thing. One of the most important activities during the summer camp is what we call the raid, basically going out of the camp to adventurously trek for a couple of days. My friends and I planned an amazing route through a beautiful mountain range called the Pyrenees in the northeast of Spain. 3 days walking, 2 nights sleeping out of the camp. My raid group consisted of 15 boys and girls, all between the ages of 12 and 14 years old. We took food with us, knew how to read a map, how to build shelter, how to search for water, and pretty much anything necessary to survive for a couple of days. So no adults were coming with us. That doesn't happen anymore. Our plans for the first day were to climb a mountain that was just under 10,000 feet high and sleep by a glacial lake nearly on top of it. It was a long walk from our camp, about 15 miles and quite steep, so at about 1800 we decided we were going to not reach the lake at a prudent time. We found a nice place to build a shelter, did it, and then cooked some dinner. We were in the middle of a beautiful mountain, about 6 miles from the nearest road, and let's add another 5 kilometers more to the closest village. We couldn't have been happier. We still had nearly 2 hours until sunset when we finished our meal. So we thought it was a good idea to send a smaller group to clean dishes and refill water to a spring we had seen while walking. I volunteered to go and 3 other friends joined. We got a couple of light torches too, just in case, and headed towards the fountain. Night came while we were on our way back to the shelter. We could hear the rest of the group singing and having fun in the distance. Suddenly one of my friends stopped and pointed at something just by the side of our trail. This wasn't here on our way down. Unsure of it, he said. There was a light reflecting pole from the road, torn into pieces. We went from being happy and relaxed to being mildly scared in just a second, and rushed all the way to where the rest of our friends were. We told them about our creepy finding right away. We were just kids, so fear escalated quite fast. Who could be hiding in the same mountain we were at, and why? Two of the older guys, they were 14 years old, thought it would be a good idea to go and take a look around to try to calm us down. Although being without them was even scarier, we also appreciated it. They went away with a light torch, a knife, and a whistle, so we could hear from further apart if they were in trouble. We remained seated inside the shelter, which was nothing more than a couple of tarps held by sticks near a big boulder, silent and scared. I remember hearing quite a lot of sobbing around me. I was thinking I didn't want to die there. One of the girls suggested that we could sing to try and think of something else. Some disapproved because we might not hear the whistles, but we did anyway, although not very loud. We were like that for about 10 to 20 minutes. The whistle interrupted our song. We heard it clearly. Two whistles coming towards us at a really fast pace. I remember taking my knife from its sheath and keeping it in my hands. Luckily, it was our friends. They arrived nervous and exhausted from the run. They said they stumbled upon a long-standing stick with lots of blood all over it, more than what our nerves could stand. Most of us started crying. Some prayed too. They told us they were going back to look for whatever was in the mountains with us and confront him. In case things go bad, we'll run somewhere else so he can't find you, one said. We asked them to stay, but nobody was able to move a finger to stop them from leaving. There was no more singing, only weeping and barely audible prayers. I just didn't want to die there. I wanted to see my family. After a while we heard some noises, followed by the voices of our friends. They came back at a calm pace with relief in their faces. It was all just a misunderstanding, one explained. It's just a park ranger. We found him, and he explained to us that he was just walking around as part of his duty, said the other, and the bloody stick was just from a rabbit he had hunted for dinner. It was quite a relief and we relaxed. Someone even spoke about taking out our sleeping bags and going to sleep, and that sounded wonderful. But it wasn't long until one of the older guys said he was a bit suspicious. You see, he wasn't wearing a uniform, he said, nor a badge or anything that could identify him as a ranger, answered another. And who walks kilometers away from the closest road, late at night, to hunt rabbits? Are there even rabbits in this altitude? Terror came back in a second. They were right. That story didn't make any sense. Let's go back there and freaking threaten him, one of the older guys said. We asked them to stay with us again and got the same results. Once they were gone, someone said that maybe he had followed them and now knew exactly where we were. We all shivered in panic. Nobody was paying the slightest attention to anyone else anymore. Nobody cried and nobody prayed. I remember I only had one thought in my mind. I'd rather kill than get killed in this terrible place. We waited seated, silent and ready to fight for our lives. We all had our knives out and ready. Minutes passed and suddenly we heard people running and approaching. We heard screams of terror. From the sound it was obvious there were more than two people coming at us. I hadn't been more scared in my life. I hope I could say goodbye to my mom, my dad and my sister. My knife was ready to stab whoever came close to me. We finally saw our two friends running for their lives, being followed by two men. They came just at the front of the opening of the shelter and stopped. The two men chasing them did the same, and we could see their faces. They were our camp leaders who had been following us all the time, but hiding, and the four started laughing at us and asking if we were scared. It was just a joke the entire time. Everyone started crying, and some even had trouble to grasp proper breaths due to anxiety for quite a while. We were all not amused, and only after a couple minutes, the funny four realized what they had done. They had taken 13 children to the point of holding a knife and being willing to kill with it. We obviously relaxed a lot, but our fears became anger. It had been a joke way out of proportion, or the most basic of common sense. They spent quite a while saying how sorry they were, but we didn't care. We wanted them to leave us alone, but on the other hand, we were still too scared to sleep on our own, so we reluctantly accepted that they all came to sleep with us. It took them months to regain our trust again. It was the worst night of my life, no doubts. I've never had nightmares about it, but I remember it like it was yesterday. Now that I'm older, I always like to think of what would have happened if two guys had been there to kill us. We were children, sure, but armed and ready to defend ourselves if need be. I'm a journalist, so I can't help but think of some headlines. 2 murderers stabbed to death in the mountains by 13 children. Things were a lot different back then, and the Scouts has definitely changed for the better. When I was in my early 20s, I had a friend with a psychotic alcoholic father. She didn't live with him. He lived in a remote little coastal town. Now and again, we would go together to visit him and stay the night. My relationship with him was creepy in itself, but that isn't the subject now. One night, when we were visiting, my friend and her dad had a drunken blow-up and kicked us out of the house. It was about midnight. We had gotten a lift down and didn't have a car. My friend's dad lived about 4 kilometers out of town, a huddle of 2 or 3 shops by way of a dirt road. We started walking down the dirt road to the town, where there was a telephone booth. This was in the days before it was commonplace to have a mobile phone. I was going to call my folks, who lived about an hour and a half away, and see if they would come get us. The whole way to town, my friend was drunkenly moaning and crying about her broken relationship with her father, and she didn't let up by the time we got to the phone booth. We sat on a bench next to the phone while I woke my parents up. They agreed to come get us, and I sat down on the bench for the long wait. Shortly after this, a van appeared and parked just behind the bench we were sitting on, maybe 5 meters away. There were 2 young men in the front seats, and they were looking at us. If that didn't make me nervous enough, the van door slid open, and I saw there were a number of young guys in the back. Remember how many? More than 2. The place we were sitting was deserted. There were no houses nearby, just more road. No people, nowhere to run, no one driving by. It was a crappy little nowhere town. I stood up so I could see them better and kept my eyes fixed on the van full of men, acutely aware of our vulnerability. What I saw was that they were looking back at us. They were talking among themselves, quietly at first. Then they started talking more and more loudly. It became evident that they were deliberately talking loud enough for us to hear. They were talking about pulling us into the van and taking us somewhere to have their way with us and kill us. I can't remember the exact words, but that was the gist of it. My whole body was not shaking, but quaking with terror. I couldn't take my eyes off the men. I remember the face of one of them so clearly. I could draw it now. He was just sitting in the door of the van, looking at me with no expression, looking at me with dead eyes, looking at me like I was a thing. At this time, my drunk friend hadn't stopped sobbing to herself. Whether she knew the van was there at all, I couldn't say. I knew I had to tell her about the danger, but I was actually so full of terror I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. That was when the most incredible thing happened. My friend's father, who has never apologized to anyone in his life, appeared, drunk, in his car. It's hard to describe how unlikely it was for him to do this. He couldn't hold a grudge like no one you've ever met, and he was such a stubborn mule. He and my friend had an emotional reunion. The whole time my eyes were fixed on the van. The men had stopped talking and were just watching us. "Let's go," I said. We got in the car and started heading for my friend's dad's house. The van started up and began to follow us. I tried to explain to my friend's dad about the men, but he said, "I'll just slow down and they can pass." They slowed to a crawl behind us, and then they began to shout out of the windows, screaming threats. They followed us all the way down the dirt road, and then all the way down the driveway of my friend's dad's house. They just sat in the van behind us, and we sat in the car, waiting to see what would happen. All of my friend's dad's neighbors were holiday homes, and nobody was in that night. We knew that if the group of men decided to get out of the van and carry out those threats, we would get no help. After a very long time, the van backed out of the driveway, and they left. My parents came in a panic to the house, and they couldn't find us at the shops. My friend's dad hid in shame, and I went back to my family's house. I've been asked if I went to the police, but I can't remember. I don't think I did. It was a messed up time in my life, but that incident changed me forever. I'm a very fearful person now, and very overprotective of my kids. And I don't want to change because I'd rather be like this than accidentally trust one of the millions of psychos out there.